And sometimes, they'll say Judah and Benjamin, which is Judah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes they say weird things sometimes. But that's a good question. That's a good question. Anybody have a thought or idea about that? Any other Bible scholars out there know that answer? So,
Well, I will state that on the next page, if you look at verse number 10, under the celebration of Passover, this first verse. So the runners passed from city to city through the country of Ephraim and Manasseh, as far as Zebulun, but they laughed at them and mocked them. So the term Ephraim and Manasseh, the fact that it says as far as Zebulun, does appear that, at least in this case, that terminology is being used for the northern kingdom of Israel.
yeah, exactly.
Again, I'm with you, I have no idea why they were worded that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or they, both of those sons of Joseph, so is that supposed to be part of that? Maybe, usually, like I said, it's usually Ephraim.
Right, usually it's
But-
just Ephraim.
But it could be that. It also, you also point out, it could be that since Manasseh's on the other side, I think there's some possibility there that it's reflecting it just wasn't in the promised land, but it was also on the other side as well
Right.
to the tribe. So Manasseh is representing also the tribe on the other side. I don't know, it's interesting language.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why they used it, but I'm not sure necessarily.
I don't always know, and that's the thing about when you use, and you can use phrases or words like this in an idiomatic way. Like we would say, sometimes you might say the states. I don't know if you've ever used the term or the word, the states. Well, what you talking about? I'm talking about the country, the United States of America. But you just condense it down to the states. So we do that from time to time. Are they doing that here? Probably, but again, the context really lets you know more about that. And so that's why I would think that it would be more of a representative nature than a specific. Even with further context in 2 Chronicles 30, verse 10, I still think it's more representative than it is, kind of anything else. So, but always pay attention to what the context says there. All right, any other questions about the reading? Any other questions? There's a lot of material, a lot of Psalms. Not a whole lot actually happened during the month of July as far as those things, Proverbs and Psalms goes, but some things. Well, let's go back a page to 795. Let's go back a page. That was 796. 2 Chronicles 29. And let's look at verse 5. Of course, we are talking about, Chronicles talk about Hezekiah, but when Hezekiah came to reign, he decided to do that which was good. He decided to do that which was right. Well, in order to do that, he had to change a lot of things. And so we can read, really even beginning in verse 1, the first year of his reign, the first month, he opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them. So even the temple itself, now who built this temple? Solomon did. It was a magnificent structure, but at this point it is broken. And they did not maintain the temple of the Lord at all. So these things the doors were broken. He had to repair them. Then he brought in the priests, the Levites, and gathered them to the east square and said to them, "Hear me, Levites, sanctify yourselves. Sanctify the house of the Lord your God, the Lord God of your fathers, and carry out the rubbish from the holy place." And so not only were the doors broken, but there was trash of whatever kind in the temple itself. And Hezekiah says, you got to go into the house of the Lord and take all the trash out. Now, I find that very interesting because we talked about a few weeks ago, it's been probably months ago actually, but 1 Corinthians 6 verse 19, what do we find today? Who is the temple of the Lord? Or what is the temple of the Lord today? Our bodies, that's right. 1 Corinthians 6:9. What know you not that your bodies are the temple of God? And so we are to keep our bodies holy, just like the children of Israel were to keep the physical temple, the physical building, keep it holy. Did they do that? No, they caused disrepair. It was broken. They didn't maintain it. There was trash everywhere. And so we today have to maintain our temples to the best of our ability so it doesn't break down unnecessarily. Now, is our temple going to break down? Yes. Oh, yes. It's going to break down. But let's not break it down. Let's not tear it down before it's time. Let's do our very best to keep up with that. And certainly we don't want to put any kind of trash or anything like that in our bodies, because when we do that, then we are abusing the temple of God. It would be just like the children of Israel abusing the temple there on this occasion. And Hezekiah having to say, okay, Levites, the priests, you go in and you got a clean house. And so sometimes we might have to do some cleaning of house, as it were. All right, let's go to page 799. This is 2 Chronicles 31. 2 Chronicles 31. And I want to read verse 20 and 21. 799. Right here in the middle of the page. Thus Hezekiah did throughout all Judah, and he did what was good and right and true before the Lord his God, and in every work that he began in the service of the house of God, in the law and in the commandment to seek his God, he did it with all his heart, so he prospered. Now, this is what I find interesting. Hezekiah, as we just read in 2 Chronicles 29, verse 3, in the very first year, in the first month, Hezekiah came in and literally cleaned house. And then we read that he got the Levite order, started them going. He started and they observed the Passover. Now they had to observe it in the second month, not the first month. They missed the first month. But they observed it the second month. And Hezekiah brought the law out. And so they read in the law. They started to obey the law. So Hezekiah did some restoring here, did he not? If you asked Hezekiah, what are you restoring? What would Hezekiah tell us today? If we had Hezekiah, King Hezekiah right here, and we said, Hezekiah, what did you restore? What would his answer be? Okay, and you're exactly right, Drew. And which law? The law of Moses.
Okay.
The law of Moses.
That's what I think of.
I understand. That's very, very, very true. You're thinking of the Ten Commandments and those kind of things. So yes, you're exactly right. But Hezekiah restored the Jewish economy and is restoring the law of Moses. And how did he accomplish that? What did he do to restore correct worship and how God wanted the Jews to, of course they're children of Israel, how he wanted them to behave and obey him? Where did he go?
It helped him, the fact that he had cleaned up the high places,
Okay.
altars, and
all the idols, all the high places that were dedicated to idols and to the celestial bodies, you know, all those kind of things. So he had to break those things down.
So then he brought the law out.
Okay, the main thing is he brought the law out, and that's what they went by. Do we have
They
that?
made everybody read it.
Right, yeah. Here's the law. They read it. They could understand what the law says. They observed what the law said to observe. And so it's not like it was a secret, right? Here's the book of God. They had it available to them. They read it and they obeyed it. Hezekiah restored the old law as God gave it when? When did God give that law? At Mount Sinai. Hundreds, would it have been 1,000 years? It doesn't matter. It was hundreds of years previous, was it not? But Hezekiah restored that. Here's my point. Can we restore New Testament Christianity today?
Try.
I think we can do more than try, Drew. I understand where you're coming from. But what did Hezekiah do? What did you say, Drew, that Hezekiah did to restore the old law?
Had everybody read it.
He brought the law out and had everybody read it. Could they all understand it? They could, because you know why? God can communicate with human beings in human language. He's smart enough to do that, isn't he? He's God. Can he communicate to me where I can understand it today? What do I have to bring out today? And I want us to be very specific. What do I have to bring out today to obey him today? The New Testament. That's exactly right. The Old Testament, what did Jesus do with that Old Testament? He fulfilled it, moved it out of the way, so that his will, Hebrews chapter 9 and 10, can now be in place. So I come to the New Testament and I can obey it. Is it hard to understand? No. My emotions might get in the way, but my mind, it can understand the words that God gives to me. So is it my obligation to restore New Testament Christianity as given by the apostles 1900 plus years ago? Yes. Listen, every generation must restore New Testament Christianity. Just like every generation should have restored the Old Testament, the old law, the law of Moses. But did they do that? No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Oh, well, that was mom and dad's, and we're just going to do our own thing. They didn't pay any attention to what mom and dad did. They didn't pay any attention to what grandma and grandpa did. If they followed the Lord. We're just going to do our own thing. No, you can't do your own thing when it comes to obeying God. You can't do your own thing when it comes to worship to God. You couldn't do that then, and you cannot do it now. When he speaks, that's the authority. We must obey him. Ricardo?
Given the fact that you brought up that centuries have passed since the old law was given, that they understood it, as you said, and we know that with time, at least the English language is evolving constantly. Like in the New Testament, Jesus' time, if you said you hated somebody, it was not the way we mean it with emotion.
That's
It's
right.
just you love less.
That's right.
And so that has to change. Some of it hasn't changed here because it still says hate.
Yes, that's true. And we do need to, have better translations. We do need better, but we also do need to update our translations. the good thing about the Hebrew and Greek language is that's used in the Bible is that they are dead languages. That is, they do not change. So whatever that word meant when God gave it, when the Holy Spirit inspired the penman to write it, it still means that very same thing today. We express it in a different way, generation to generation. Language evolves, that's true. But the original never changes. So we don't have to update that, but we do have to update, how we express ourselves, because language does change. But are we able to do that? Yeah, we are. We're able to accomplish that. It's challenging. It's not impossible.
You gotta be careful though who does it.
That is a very good point. And actually, I'm going to piggyback on that very idea.
Gotta get me a Queen James version.
Yeah. He said, you got to give me a Queen James version. Isn't that terrible? Isn't that terrible? That even such a thing exists. But, God allows that. If a human being wants to do something, God will allow it. Are they going to get away with that eternally? The answer is no. They're not going to get away with that, no matter what they believe. But you have to be careful about who does the translating. There's a mindset of translation. And there's actually a spectrum of translations. And by the way, the Queen James, the Cotton Patch version, you could even in one sense go as far as some of the, now I know they're not the whole, they're not the whole Bible or anything like that, but your musicals like Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, or Jesus Christ Superstar, or somebody yelled something else out there.
Godspell.
Godspell, thank you. That's an excellent one too. Those in a sense are also now they're, paraphrase and other things like that, but they attempt to tell the Bible story, at least a specific story, in a certain way, in a modern way, right? So you have to be careful about that. I remember, I'm going to tell on myself here, I remember watching Charlton Heston playing Moses.
I got that if you want to see it.
You got that? And obviously early on, there is the scene of course, it's been such a long time since I've seen the movie, but anyway, Tower of Babel is in that. Isn't the Tower of Babel in that movie early on in that movie?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
There's an old movie. Well, maybe it's not the Ten Commandments. Maybe it's a different one. I thought Charlton Heston was in it. Anyway, there's a movie where it's from that era, and the Tower of Babel, and then the people kind of get scattered with all their different languages, or whatever film that was. Anyway, so all I remember is I turned to Dad, because I remember I was in Redwater, Texas, on that brown carpet. All of the walls are paneled, and that wood paneling, and the TV set is on the little TV carrier with the aluminum foil on the UHF receiver. Does that bring back memories, by the way? By the way, I was the channel changer. I was the remote control. I told you I was telling on myself. These guys have no idea what I'm talking about. Even Allie, she has no idea. Anyway, so we were watching that, and I remember turning back to Dad and saying, well, all we have to do is figure out what language they were speaking, at the Tower of Babel, and then we'll know everything. No, that's not how that works. And so, of course, I was a little kid. But in other words, you have to be careful, even about films, movies, that you go back to the source, and what does the source actually say? When you Google, let's take the book of Isaiah, for instance. I Googled date of the book of Isaiah, and this is what the Google machine came up with. It's AI, of course. The book of Isaiah was not written all at once. And now that in one sense is true. Isaiah didn't just sit down and, all 66 chapters in one, but that's not what this is saying.
Right.
Scholars, that's higher critics, is what he's saying. They have a degree, so they think they know something that they have no idea about. And here's the thing about scholarship is they've made certain decisions. And here's the biggest error that scholars make in theology. The Bible is not inspired by God. That's the biggest mistake. They start off. It's like evolutionists begin with, there is no God. Well, who says that there is no God? What does the Bible say? The Bible says somebody says there is no God. Who says there is no God? The fool says there is no God. So look, it doesn't matter what kind of alphabet soup you got behind your name. If you say there is no God, in his eyes, you are a fool. That's just all there is to it. So your higher critics of your scholars of the Bible begin with, God didn't write it. Man wrote the Bible. Listen, there's no way he could write the Bible, but that's a different situation. Scholars generally divide this composition into three distinct historical periods, spanning from the 8th to the 5th centuries BC. Well, of course, Isaiah didn't live that long. Reflecting the ministry of the original prophet in Jerusalem, as well as later additions during and after the Babylonian exile. So in other words, what the higher critics is going to say is that Isaiah did write a little bit, but then editors came in and added material on later. There's no way that Isaiah could have written all of it. He just wrote a small portion of the scriptures. Why? Because they do not believe that God wrote the Bible. They believe that men wrote the Bible, uninspired men. So they believe that Isaiah wrote the first 39 chapters in between 740 and 701, which is actually probably correct. I probably would say closer to 730, 725 to 700, but that's all right. Historical context, of course, attributed largely to the historical prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, who lived in Jerusalem. It's attributed to that because that's who he said wrote it. Did he lie? And if he did, if somebody else wrote it, why would you pay any attention to anything that it says? If I wrote a letter and I put Ricardo's name on it, would you pay attention to that letter and you knew that Ricardo wrote it? But I wrote it? That's dishonest. It's not worth the paper it's written on. Isaiah says he wrote it. Well, you know what? I'm just going to believe the man. Let's see. I can't read this. Oh, hey. It's only on 16. Isaiah, son of Amos, called vision, chapter 6, day of the year of Uzziah's death, which variously calculated 742 or 734. We talked about that time difference. It covers the events up to the Assyrian king Sennacherib's invasion of Judah, 701. Then chapter 40 to 55. See, this is why they can't have Isaiah writing this, because these things are prophetic beyond his time, his lifetime, you see. You know, hey, composed by an anonymous prophet. No, he tells you who wrote it.
That would be a
How did they
historian.
know he was anonymous?
You know, that's a good question if he didn't put his name on it. During the Babylonian exile, addresses the impending fall of Babylon, which it does. And we'll talk about that maybe here in a few minutes. Anticipated the return of Jewish exiles. That's exactly right. But you know, other prophets also prophesied that a remnant would return to Judah. A remnant is going to remain. I don't know how many prophets prophesied a remnant is going to return, but it's not one or two. Practically all of them, actually.
Sometimes, so what modern critics, this is, a lot of this is modern.
Yes.
Coming out of the German school of the 19th century, out of Germany.
That's true.
There.
That's true. Hang on to that thought. Before there was sort of a philosophical realignment, let's say, back in the 1800s. Germany was the hot spot, and then, of course, disseminated everywhere. They just thought they were better than everybody. How'd that work out in the 1930s and 40s, by the way? Because that really was part of the culmination of that. That's part of it. Anyway, before that, none of these ideas were even thought of. All right, go ahead, Chad.
The argument is that they'll take the first 39 chapters, and then they'll compare it and say the writing style is different. That's one of the arguments.
Mm-hmm.
Is the writing style is different. And you see that not just in Isaiah, but in other books. So like First and Second Peter, they'll claim that sometimes they'll claim neither one was written by Peter, but they'll definitely say that Second Peter wasn't written by Peter because if Peter wrote First Peter, the writing style is different. And that's more the textual criticism. They'll say there's just different styles of language,
Right.
but it's also the backing. Really, what it is there's certain things from 40 to 66 that are more supernaturally based.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, like I said, when you have the name Cyrus brought up.
That's right. Absolutely. And you have, you know, other prophecies that Isaiah is getting into, and yet, especially knowing how the children of Israel, that is the prophets, let's just stick with the prophets of Israel and Judah, how they wrote. Well, it's even, a lot of times even how the Bible is put together is by subject, by ideas. They were idea people. And so the idea was more important than chronology. That's why it's so challenging to read our Bibles, is because it's more of a subject situation than it is chronological. It's a little bit of a challenge to us there. And then, of course, they do a third Isaiah time period in the last 10, 11 chapters, and they say that that's the late 6th to 5th centuries, written after the return to Jerusalem, because it's so specific, focusing on the rebuilding of the temple, the community's restoration, and of course Q is, that's a High Critics edition, initial editions Q, regarding the single versus multiple authorship, with traditional views ascribing the entire text to the 8th century prophet. No kidding. While modern scholarly consensus views it as a composite work compiled across centuries. Well, I'll stick to what the author actually says, that Isaiah, the son of Amos, wrote all of it. And, you know, and here here's the other thing to that. Of course, I know it was after the third period, but at the same time, it was, the Dead Sea Scrolls, again, I know it's not all the way back to, even before this third period, but it is such a singular book that Isaiah is definitely, just one piece of literature. Does it go through different subjects and ideas? Absolutely it does. Sure. Just like a whole lot of other books in the Bible too. But it was written by one individual, that being Isaiah. And here's the interesting thing to me in Isaiah chapter 23 beginning, that Isaiah talks about, Isaiah 7:14, by the way, Isaiah prophesies the virgin birth, and Alma, young woman, this is a virgin. This is a virgin. This is someone who's not known man. Young married women, that's who's supposed to have children, folks. Those are the ones that are having the most children. Young married women. He's not talking about young married women. He's talking about a virgin. That would be something to behold. But in Isaiah 23, here on page 870, God did not just prophesy or cause his prophets to talk just to the children of Israel. He spoke to the nations around as well. He was concerned about and knew about all the nations around. He begins with Ethiopia in chapter 23. He then turns his attention to Egypt, a number of, outside of Isaiah, a number of prophecies dealing with Egypt. Babylon, of course, Edom, Arabia, and other, Tyre, and that's Isaiah 19 through 21. And then he deals with Tyre in Isaiah chapter 23. Tyre, of course, is on the coast of north of Israel, north of the land of Canaan. It was a very important merchant city because a lot of the merchandise from Chaldea, Babylon, Persia, even as far as India, and who knows, perhaps even China, all of that merchandise would come across the land and end up in Tyre. And they were getting very well. They were very wealthy. They weren't getting wealthy. They were wealthy. And then ships would come to Tyre, load up merchandise and trade, and then they would go to North Africa, Greece, Italy, Spain, and so all of your European ports and your North African ports. And so there was a huge world trade that was going on in the ancient world. And it all centered in practically one town. And that one town was Tyre. And God said, and they were wealthy, it was well defended. They had every advantage. And God says, you're going to be destroyed. Now it's going to take 2 destructions, but you're going to be destroyed. And guess what happened? After time number 2, Alexander the Great took the old town, threw it into the ocean, and took the new town and razed it. No, not this way raised. Raised it. With a Z. You don't want to be raised with a Z. But Tyre was. And guess who said it first? The God of heaven told Isaiah. And it happened. And Alexander the Great ultimately fulfilled that prophecy. So God is interested in other nations, not just the children of Israel and the Jews. He says in Isaiah 31, verse 1, do not rely on your alliances, especially Egypt. And a lot of times the children of Israel would get afraid of, a big bully empire or whatever, and they would run to Egypt, or they would run to their cousins, maybe the Moabites or the Edomites, or one another as the divided kingdom. They would run to one another and say, hey, we need to, band together. And God says, don't do that. Why don't you come to me instead? And what did they do? Did they run to God and ask him? Very few times. There were a few times. Hezekiah did it. Very few times. Most of the time, what do they do? Oh, we're going to make the alliance anyway. And, okay. Wasn't Jeff Foxworthy? Here's your sign.
Bill Engvall.
Oh, was it Bill Engvall? Well, I knew it was one of those guys. I knew who it wasn't. Anyway, Bill Engvall. That's right. That's who it was. Here's your sign. God keeps giving them signs, and they keep dismissing them. Well, there you go. Chad?
It should be interesting to note that the northern kingdom was finally taken away when, after the last king made entreaties toward Egypt to help with the Assyrians.
That's right.
And so you wonder, it's quite possible that that's what finally caused God to shut the door. Of course, it was happening anyway, but
True.
by turning to Egypt, or trying to make an alliance and get them help, that may have been the cause, because that's what God had forbidden them back in Deuteronomy,
Mm-hmm.
to not make an alliance.
Don't make
The king
alliance.
couldn't come from Egypt, the king doesn't come from Egypt, and you don't have chariots, which of course the Egyptians were known for.
That's right. That's right. And, and then of course, what does, who does Zedekiah there? And Jeremiah, the king of Zedekiah, what does he do? That's not the right king. The last king of Judah as they were getting taken into Babylon captivity. His name's, I'm coming up blank on his name right now. Who? Jehoiakim, yes. Oh, no, we're going to obey God, and we're not going to go to Egypt. And Jeremiah says, okay, good, because you're not supposed to go to Egypt. You're supposed to stay right where you are, and everything will be fine. And what did Jehoiakim do? Went right to Egypt. And what happened? They all died. Just like God said. If you go to Egypt, you're going to die. Don't make alliances with them. Death is in Egypt. Don't go back there. And so, well, we'll never learn. Never learn. All right. That's all we have time for. That time goes by quickly, doesn't it? Man, it goes by.
2 weeks.
Say again?
You're gonna have to have 2 Wednesdays a month.
We might need 2 Wednesdays a month, I'm telling you. Because we got to July the 2nd. Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Okay, we're going to take just a short break and then have our devotional period.